57 Hours to Live. October 23, 2002. Moscow, 9:05 p.m. The second act has just begun. Inside, 850 people sit in velvet seats, watching actors dance across the stage. A World War II love story. Children clutch their parents' arms. Couples lean into each other. A grandmother wipes tears. No one notices the side doors opening. 41 figures in black pour into the theater. They're carrying Kalashnikov rifles, handguns, grenades. Enough explosives to level the building twice over. A man in camouflage steps onto the stage, his face wrapped in a black mask. He fires 3 shots into the ceiling. The music stops. The screaming starts. His name is Movsar Barayev. He's 23 years old, and he has 57 hours to change Russian history or die trying. "Everyone sit down," he shouts, in accented Russian. "If you follow orders, you will live. If you don't," he gestures to the women spreading through the aisles. Each one wears a black hijab. Each one has a bomb strapped to her chest. Dead man switches in their hands. We all die together. Outside, Moscow police receive the first panicked calls at 9:12 p.m. By 9:30, the building is surrounded. By 10 o'clock, Russian President Vladimir Putin is woken in the Kremlin with news that will define his presidency. 850 hostages, 41 terrorists, 19 suicide bombers with enough explosives to kill everyone in the building and everyone within 100 meters. The demands arrive at midnight. Russia must withdraw all forces from Chechnya within 1 week. If they refuse, the hostages die. All of them. Putin has fought wars. He's ordered assassinations. He's rebuilt Russia from the ashes of the Soviet Union. But he's never faced anything like this. Here's what makes this crisis different. There is no good option. Storm the building? The bombers detonate before the first soldier. Negotiate? The terrorists have already proven they're willing to die. Wait? They've brought enough food for days, and every hour that passes, the hostages grow weaker. Over the next 57 hours, Vladimir Putin will make decisions. Decisions that save some lives and end others. Decisions that remain classified to this day. Decisions that, when the truth finally emerged, shocked the world. How did 130 hostages die in a rescue operation? Russia called a success? What really happened inside that theater? Why has the Russian government spent 20 years hiding the truth? If you're new here and you love investigations into moments the world tried to forget, subscribe now, because this story is just getting started. To understand how Russia ended up gassing its own citizens, to save them, we need to understand who was waiting inside that theater and why they wanted to die. Chapter 2, The Black Widows. Chechnya, 1999. 3 years before the theater siege, the Russian army rolls through. Villages become a steel flood. Apartment buildings collapse into rubble. Hospitals burn. Families disappear in the night. The Second Chechen War has begun. Vladimir Putin has promised to wipe out the rebels. By 2002, 25,000 Chechen civilians are dead. Entire towns erased from the map. The world barely notices. But in the mountains of Chechnya, someone is planning revenge. Movsar Barayev isn't a military genius. He's young, impulsive, and known more for his brutality than for his strategy. His uncle, Arbi Barayev, was one of the most feared warlords in Chechnya before Russian forces killed him in 2001. Movsar inherited his uncle's rage and his network. But the real power inside that theater isn't Movsar. It's the women. 19 of them, ages ranging from 16 to 42. Russian media will call them Black Widows. Women who lost husbands, brothers, fathers, and sons to Russian bombs and bullets. Women who have nothing left to lose. Zura Barayeva, 23, watched Russian soldiers execute her husband in front of their home. Aset Gishirkayeva, 20, lost 3 brothers in a single airstrike. Kadijat Mangareva, 42, buried her entire family in a mass grave outside Grozny. Each one volunteered for a suicide mission. Each one strapped 1.5 kilograms of plastic explosives to her chest. Each one holds a dead man's switch, a trigger that detonates if she releases pressure, if she falls asleep, if she dies. Kill one Black Widow, and she kills everyone around her. Russian special forces have never trained for this. The terrorists spent months preparing for the attack. They smuggled weapons into Moscow. Piece by piece, they rented apartments near the theater. They studied the building's layout, entrances, and weak points. They even bought tickets to Nordost multiple times to memorize the seating arrangement. On the night of October 23rd, RD, they arrived in a bus marked police. The guards never questioned it. Inside, Movsar Barayev positions his fighters. Armed men at every exit. Black widows spread throughout the audience. Sitting among the hostages, explosives wired to the walls, the pillars, the balcony. One wrong move, and the building becomes a mass grave. By midnight, the hostages understand their situation. There's no escape, there's no negotiation, there's only waiting and praying that someone outside these walls can do the impossible. If you're still watching, you already know. This story doesn't have a happy ending, but what happens next is worse than you can imagine. Stay with us. Chapter 3 to 850 Trapped Souls. Hour 1. Inside the theater. But the actors are now hostages, huddled in the front rows, with the audience they were performing for. Georgy Vasilyev tries to calm the crowd. Everyone stay seated. Do exactly what they say. Help is coming. He doesn't believe his own words. He's seen the explosives. He's counted the guns. The terrorists begin sorting hostages. Foreign nationals, Americans, Germans, British, are separated and moved to specific sections. Children are identified. Pregnant women located. Movsar Barayev wants the world watching. He wants cameras, journalists, negotiations. International hostages make for international pressure. By 2 a.m., the first phone calls go out. Hostages are allowed, encouraged, to call their families. The terrorists want panic. They want mothers screaming. They want mothers screaming on television. They want Moscow to feel what Chechnya has felt. Tamara Starkova, 46, calls her daughter. They say we have 3 days. Tell everyone. Tell the news. They're not bluffing. Her daughter records the call. Within hours, it's on every Russian network. Inside, a strange routine develops. Water, but no food. Bathroom breaks are supervised, 6 hostages at a time. The Black Widows rotate in shifts. Triggers always held. Dr. Leonid Rochal becomes the first negotiator allowed inside. He's 69 years old, white-haired, soft-spoken. He walks into a room full of explosives. Asks to see the children. The terrorists let him. For 20 minutes, Dr. Rochal moves through the theater. Checking on hostages. Distributing medicine. He counts the bombs. Everything goes straight to Russian intelligence. They're serious, he tells authorities when he emerges. This isn't a bluff. Those women want to die. By hour 12, the hostages begin to break. A man in his 50s suffers a heart attack. The terrorists allow him to be carried out, the only hostage released for medical reasons. A teenage girl faints from fear and dehydration. A child wets himself, too terrified to ask for the bathroom. And above them all, wired to the ceiling, hangs a bomb large enough to bring down the entire structure. Movsar Barayev releases a videotape to Russian media. He sits in front of a black flag, flanked by armed men. We came here to die, he says. Our lives mean nothing. Your government has 3 days to end this war, or we end this theater. Putin watches the tape from the Kremlin. He doesn't blink. The clock is ticking, and he's already made his decision. October 24th, 2002, 6 a.m. The Kremlin. Vladimir Putin hasn't slept. Every one of them is telling him the same thing. There is no clean way out. Option 1. Negotiate. Give the Chechens what they want. Putin dismisses this immediately. Withdraw from Chechnya? Admit defeat to terrorists on live television? It would end his presidency. It would make Russia look weak to the world. Not an option. Option 2. Wait them out. Starve the terrorists into surrender. The problem? The hostages will die first. They're already dehydrated. Some are diabetic without insulin. Others have heart conditions. Children are crying from hunger. And the terrorists have proven they can hold the building indefinitely. Not an option. Option 3. Storm the building. The FSB's elite Alpha Group has trained for exactly this scenario. They can breach every entrance simultaneously. They can neutralize armed hostiles in seconds. They've done it before, but they've never faced 19 suicide bombers with dead man switches. Russian intelligence runs the numbers. In a best-case scenario, perfect execution, every terrorist killed instantly. At least 6 to 8 Black Widows will detonate before soldiers can reach them. Minimum casualties, 200 hostages. More likely, 400 to 500. Worst case, everyone dies. Not an option. Putin stares at the map of the theater. There has to be a fourth option. By mid-morning, FSB scientists propose something unprecedented. Something that's never been attempted in any hostage situation. What if they could neutralize everyone in the building? Hostages and terrorists alike before the assault begins? The idea is elegant and horrifying. Pump an incapacitating agent through the theater's ventilation system. The Black Widows can't detonate their bombs if they're already asleep. The armed men can't shoot if they can't stand. Once everyone is unconscious, Alpha Group enters. They execute the terrorists. They carry out the hostages. They save the day. On paper, it's perfect. There's just one problem. The gas that works fast enough to stop a suicide bomber is the same gas that's powerful enough to kill the people you're trying to save. Putin asks one question. What are the survival rates? The scientists can't give him an answer. They've never tested this on 850 people in a confined space. They don't know the exact dosage. They don't know how the elderly will react, or the children, or people with asthma. Putin has less than 48 hours to decide. And outside the theater, families are begging for a miracle that isn't coming. If you're finding this story hard to believe, subscribe now, because what Russia did next has been classified for over 2 decades. October 24th, hour 26, inside the theater. Hope is dying. The hostages haven't eaten in over a day. Water is rationed. A few sips every few hours. The air is thick with sweat, fear, and the chemical smell of the explosives taped to the walls. Children whimper. Adults stare at nothing. Olga Chernyak, 34, sits with her 2 daughters, ages 8 and 11. She tells them stories to keep them calm. Fairy tales about princes and castles and happy endings. She doesn't tell them that she's already said goodbye. At 3 p.m., negotiators secure a small victory. The terrorists agree to release 39 hostages, all of them children under 12 with foreign passports. Russian children stay. The release is chaotic. Parents scream as their children are taken. Some refuse to let go. The terrorists drag kids away by their arms. One mother tries to follow her son, is thrown back into her seat at gunpoint. Those 39 children, the last hostages who will walk out alive. By evening, the first execution happens. Olga Romanova stands up and walks toward the stage. She shouts at the terrorists. She curses them. Movsar Barayev gives her one warning. She keeps walking. A single shot. She falls. Her body is dragged behind the stage. The hostages don't see what happens next, but they hear it. 2 more shots. The message is clear. Obey or die. At 11 p.m., a second hostage is killed. This time a man who rushed the gunman. He makes it 3 steps before they shoot him. In the chest. Outside, the families hear about the executions on the news. The crowds around the police barricades grow violent. Mothers try to push through. Fathers scream at soldiers. One man has to be restrained from rushing the building. Inside the Kremlin, Putin receives updates every 15 minutes. The situation is deteriorating. Fast. At midnight, The terrorists issue a new ultimatum. They've lost patience with negotiations. If Russia doesn't announce a troop withdrawal by dawn, they'll start killing hostages, one every hour, starting with the foreign nationals. Putin's window is closing. He convenes his war council for a final decision. By 3 a.m., the order is given. Prepare the gas. October 25th, hour 42. Dawn arrives gray and cold. Outside the Dubrovka Theater, police and military have established a perimeter 3 blocks wide. Snipers on every rooftop, armored vehicles at every intersection, helicopters circling overhead. But no one is moving. The terrorists are showing cracks. Movsar Barayev paces constantly, shouting into his phone. The Black Widows sit motionless, their dead man switches clenched. One twitch, and it's over. Iosif Kobzon, a Soviet-era singer, walks into the theater alone. He's 65, a member of parliament, and completely unarmed. For 3 hours, Kobzon talks with Barayev inside. He brings water, juice, and chocolate for the hostages. He convinces terrorists to release 8 people. Women claim to be pregnant, though only some actually are. "We're not leaving," Barayev tells him, defiant. "Russia withdraws or everyone dies. Those are the only options." He can't convince them to surrender completely. Kobzon emerges from the theater at noon. His face tells the story before he speaks. "They're ready to die," he tells the cameras. All of them, the women especially. They want martyrdom. The afternoon passes in agonizing slow motion. No new releases, no new demands, just silence and waiting. At 5 p.m., something changes. "They're wiring more explosives," he whispers. Putin receives the update at 5:30 p.m. By 6 p.m., Alpha Group begins final preparations. The gas canisters are loaded. The assault teams are briefed. Medical units are supposedly placed on standby. Every soldier knows the plan. 30 seconds after the gas deploys, they breach. Every terrorist gets 2 shots to the head, no exceptions. It should take 4 minutes to secure the building. The hostages won't even know what's happening until it's over. That's the theory anyway. But as any soldier knows, no plan survives first contact. And when Russia makes its move, everything will go wrong. This is the moment that changed everything. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe. You'll want to see what we cover next. October 26th, 2002, 5 a.m. The hostages are asleep. Those who can sleep. The theater is dark, lit only by emergency lights, and the glow of explosives, blinking timers. 57 hours of terror have reduced 850 people, the hollow-eyed survivors running on adrenaline and prayer. The terrorists don't know that the building's ventilation system was compromised 2 days ago. FSB engineers spent 18 hours mapping the ductwork, finding access points, testing airflow patterns. They've been ready since yesterday. At 5:03 a.m., Russian special forces inject an aerosol agent into the theater's ventilation system. To this day, Russia has never officially confirmed what chemical was used. Independent investigations point to a derivative of carfentanil, a synthetic opioid approximately 10,000 times more powerful than morphine. It's used to tranquilize elephants. In humans, even microscopic doses can cause respiratory failure. The gas spreads through the theater in less than 60 seconds. Hostages closest to the vents are the first to notice. A strange smell, sweet, almost chemical. Then a heaviness in their limbs. Then nothing. Within 2 minutes, 90% of the people inside are unconscious. The Black Widows slump in their seats. Their hands go limp. But here's the critical detail. Dead man switches don't always work the way movies show. Several women's triggers release as they fall unconscious. The bombs don't detonate. Movsar Barayev staggers toward the stage, trying to shout orders. By 5:05 a.m., he's unconscious on the floor. At 5:06 a.m., Alpha Group breaches. Doors explode inward simultaneously, front, back, sides. 200 soldiers pour into the theater. Gas masks, covering their faces, weapons raised. They find bodies everywhere, slumped in seats, sprawled in aisles, collapsed on the stage. It looks like a mass suicide. Soldiers don't hesitate. They move through the theater systematically, putting 2 rounds into every terrorist they find. Not a single bomb detonates. The building is secured in under 4 minutes. Russian television breaks the news at 5:30 a.m. The siege is over. The hostages are saved. But outside the theater, something is very, very wrong. Ambulances aren't arriving. Medical teams aren't ready. And the hostages who are being carried out, they're not waking up. They're dying. 5:15 a.m. outside the Dubrovka Theater. The first hostages emerge on stretchers. Soldiers carry them 2 at a time, laying them on the frozen ground outside. Some are breathing. Some aren't moving at all. There are no ambulances. Dr. Leonid Roshal, the same pediatrician who negotiated with the terrorist, runs toward the bodies. He finds hostages foaming at the mouth, lips turning blue, chests barely rising. He knows instantly what's happening. Opioid overdose. Hundreds of them. There's an antidote, naloxone. It reverses opioid effects in seconds. Every hospital in Moscow has it. Every ambulance should carry it. But the ambulances aren't here. The Russian government never told the medical teams what gas they were using. The hospitals were kept in the dark. The first responders arrived expecting blast injuries and gunshot wounds, not mass poisoning. Roshal screams for naloxone. None available. He screams for oxygen tanks. Not enough. He screams for help carrying bodies. For more doctors, for anyone who can perform CPR. Hostages are laid on city buses, the only vehicles large enough to transport them. They're stacked on seats, on floors, on each other. No medical supervision. No monitoring. Some choke on their own vomit. The first confirmed death happens at 5:40 a.m. A woman in her 60s who never regained consciousness. By 6 a.m., the death count reaches double digits. Moscow's hospitals are overwhelmed. They don't know what they're treating. They don't have enough antidote. They don't have enough ventilators. Doctors are forced to choose who gets treatment and who gets left in the hallway. The government maintains radio silence. No one will confirm what gas was used. No one will release treatment protocols. Doctors are operating blind. By noon, the death toll reaches 67. By evening, 115. By the end of the week, 130 hostages are dead. Many investigators believe the true count is higher, possibly over 170, with deaths classified as unrelated medical complications. Here's what makes this a scandal, not just a tragedy. Every one of those deaths was preventable. If the hospitals had known what gas was coming, they could have stockpiled naloxone. If the ambulances had been positioned correctly, they could have started treatment immediately. If the soldiers had been trained to position unconscious hostages safely, they wouldn't have choked on their own tongues. The Russian government knew what they were doing. They chose not to tell anyone. And when the question started, they chose to lie. This isn't just incompetence. This is something darker. Subscribe now, because the cover-up is worse than the crime. November 2002, Moscow. The funerals begin. 130 coffins, 130 families destroyed. 130 lives ended not by terrorists, but by their own government's rescue. Svetlana Gubareva lost her daughter, 13-year-old Sandy, and her fiancé in the theater. Both survived the 57-hour siege. Both died from the gas. Sandy never regained consciousness. She was laid in a hospital hallway and forgotten, while doctors scrambled to save others. Dmitry Milovidov, 15, texted his mother from inside the theater, "Mom, I love you. If I die, know I love you." He survived the terrorists. He survived the gas. He died 3 days later from pneumonia, caused by inhaling his own vomit while unconscious. Kristina Kurbatova, 13, attended the musical with her aunt. Both were carried out alive. Both died at the hospital. Kristina's mother received her daughter's body, wrapped in plastic bags. The Russian government declares victory. President Putin addresses the nation. He praises the special forces. He mourns the tragic losses. He never apologizes He never explains why the hospitals weren't prepared. He never reveals what gas was used. When journalists ask questions, they're told it's classified. When families demand answers, they're told to be grateful. The alternative was worse. But the families don't feel grateful. They feel betrayed. Within months, a survivor group forms. They hire lawyers. They file lawsuits. They demand an independent investigation. The Russian government blocks every attempt. Autopsies are sealed. Medical records disappear. Doctors who speak to journalists are threatened. One coroner who questioned the official death toll is fired and prosecuted for, quote, violating state secrets. The European Court of Human Rights eventually rules that Russia violated the hostages' right to life, not by using the gas, but by failing to provide adequate medical care afterward. Russia is ordered to pay compensation to the families. Putin's government pays the minimum required and admits nothing. To this day, Russia has never officially revealed what gas was used in the Dubrovka theater. No criminal charges were ever filed. No official was ever punished. The only people held accountable are the dead terrorists and the families still waiting for answers. Some of those families are still fighting. 20 years later, they gather every October 23rd outside the theater, now renamed and renovated, to remember what happened, to demand the truth. They've never received it. October 2022. 20 years later, the musical Nordost was never performed again. A small memorial plaque lists the names of the dead. The official 130, not the suspected 170. Most of the world has forgotten what happened here, but the questions remain. Why were medical teams not prepared? The government had 57 hours to plan. They knew they were using a potentially lethal gas. They chose not to warn hospitals. Why has Russia never identified the gas? International treaties require disclosure of chemical agents used on civilian populations. Russia has ignored every request. Why did so many hostages die in transport? Bodies were stacked on buses with no medical supervision. And the most disturbing question of all, acceptable losses? Did the Russian government consider those deaths acceptable losses? Some analysts believe the answer is yes. Putin needed a victory. He needed to show that Russia doesn't negotiate with terrorists. Attacking Russia brings annihilation. Even if some of your own people die in the process, Russia will sacrifice its own citizens. Russia will sacrifice its own citizens before it shows weakness. The Dubrovka theater siege wasn't an anomaly. It was a preview. If this story shocked you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The world forgot what happened in that theater. It shouldn't have. And if you want to see more investigations into the stories governments try to bury, subscribe to this channel. We've covered how one man exposed Wall Street's darkest secrets, how hackers stole $1 billion from banks, and how the FBI infiltrated the most dangerous groups in America. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications, because some stories are too important to miss. The 130 coffins were buried. The questions never were. And sometimes, the only memorial the dead get is the truth.